And now on BBC News 24, it's time for Hard Talk.
Israel is tightening the noose around the neck of Gaza by blocking fuel supplies. Israel's adamant the Palestinian territory, run by Hamas since its violent coup last summer, will get the bare minimum, whilst the Islamic militants remain in charge. My guest on Hard Talk today is a supporter of Hamas and author of a book on the group, a Palestinian-born academic now living in Britain. Dr. Azam Tamimi, welcome to Hard Talk. This is an important moment in Middle East peace. President Bush says he has renewed zeal. He says there'll be a peace deal in a year's time by the time he leaves office in January 2009. Do you share that confidence?
Not at all. I don't think that Bush came to the region for peace. I think he came for his own purposes. He came in order to sell the Gulf countries more weapons for no use whatsoever, and to give a green light to Ehud Olmert to hit Gaza hard.
Peace would require both sides to compromise, of course. Do you think Hamas wants to compromise?
Well, peace would require negotiations, unconditional negotiations. Israel is adamant it would not talk to Hamas, and so long as Israel is unwilling to talk to the representative of the Palestinian people, you are sure not to have peace.
But there are reasons for that, of course. Hamas still believes in the armed struggle against Israel and still believes that Israel should not exist.
Well, in every conflict, if you want to end the conflict, you talk to those you are fighting or those who are fighting you. This is the case in the Vietnam War. This was the case in South Africa. This was the case in the Northern Ireland conflict. Hamas believes in something. Israel believes in another. If we want to end the conflict, they have to talk.
But I suppose if you quote there Northern Ireland, and in that case the IRA had to renounce the armed struggle. It had to decide it was going to allow Sinn Féin, its political representatives, to negotiate without the threat of the gun or the bomb.
That was the result of negotiations rather than a precondition to negotiations. It's not true at all that the IRA agreed to any conditions before sitting down and talking to the British government.
But for it to really proceed, there had to be the end of armed struggle.
Well, eventually you're going to reach peace, but there have to be peace on both sides. It's the Israelis who are occupying Palestinian land and not the other way around.
If there is to be peace, though, it's going to require both sides to recognise each other, isn't it? Hamas will have to decide it is going to recognise Israel if there's to be any step forward.
No, this issue of recognition is naive and is childish. You see, for the Palestinians, it's impossible to recognise that what happened to them in 1948 was legitimate, was right. We were dispossessed. The Jews came from Europe to solve their own problem in Europe and to solve the European problem at the expense of the Palestinians. If my mother was dispossessed of her home, my father of his land, and millions of Palestinians suffered the same fate, how can it be right? We cannot recognize that as legitimate.
How can there be a solution, though, without that mutual recognition?
Well, first of all, you have to disengage. You have to bring the killing to an end. And we had a number of golden opportunities that were totally trashed. They were not seized upon. The first was when the Palestinians, for the first time, elected a legislative council that the entire world testified was truly representative. The Israelis refused to talk to Hamas at the time.
You know the Hamas leadership very well. You've written a book about Hamas and the history of Hamas. Do you think they show any sign at all of willing to negotiate, of willing to compromise in order to negotiate?
Willing to talk about ending the conflict, yes. As early as 1994, Sheikh Ahmed Yassin offered the Israelis a truce, means a ceasefire of some sort. In order to discuss the details of the ceasefire, you have to sit down and talk with the concerned parties. The Israelis would never accept to talk.
Well, I notice you're choosing your words very carefully. Willing to talk, but does that necessarily signify willing to compromise, willing to give something?
Well, you have to talk first. Hamas has agreed in the negotiations with Fatah in 2006 that we would settle down for a Palestinian state within the borders of 1967. And that was another opportunity that was rejected by the Americans and the Israelis.
You're off to Damascus on Wednesday for a meeting which will include the Hamas leadership. plenty of other groups as well, to discuss the Middle East peace after President Bush's latest initiative. Where do you think that's going? What's this meeting supposed to achieve?
Well, this meeting was supposed originally to be held in parallel with Annapolis, but at the time the Syrians asked Hamas to postpone it. When Annapolis failed, as seen by many Arabs, the Syrians gave the green light to Hamas to convene the conference. The idea of the conference is to say this peace process that is brokered by the Americans is not the way forward. The way forward is to say, let's unite the Palestinian house first, put it in order, and talk as a united voice.
Of course, I suppose one group that's not going to be represented in Damascus is President Abbas's Fatah movement.
There will be members of Fatah who are unhappy with the way Mahmoud Abbas is taking the movement. But Mahmoud Abbas himself will not be represented.
So does that mean this meeting's trying for a united front of non-Fatah groups?
I wouldn't put it this way. I would say an anti-Annapolis front, an anti-US brokered sort of peace front.
Is that realistic, though, to try to set something up without involving Fatah? There's got to be Palestinian unity first, hasn't there, before there can be any Middle East peace?
Indeed, indeed, that's the hope. That's what Khalid Mash'al said a couple of days ago when he made an appeal to Mahmoud Abbas and said to him, let's talk. Gaza is under enormous pressure, is in enormous difficulty. This is the moment to talk unconditionally. So Hamas is always willing, remains open to talking. It's the other side who keeps coming up with American and Israeli conditions.
Do you think there can ever be a deal again with Fatah?
I doubt it, in fact, because in my opinion, Fatah is in total disarray. And those who are running the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah are no longer Fatah officials. Fayyad is not Fatah. Yasser Abdrabbo is not Fatah. Many of the people who are now running the ship or commandeering it are not really Fatah.
The trouble with all this disunity, it gives the Israelis the perfect excuse, and the Americans, I suppose it could be argued, to say, how many Palestinian groups are we meant to negotiate with? We want to negotiate with one Palestinian entity, and you're just not providing it.
Of course, disunity is a very harmful thing for the Palestinian cause, but the Palestinians have always been divided, simply because there have been all sorts of interventions from regional powers as well as international powers in order to deny the Palestinians this united position. And this has been the case for more than 20 years.
Doesn't the disunity cost you heavily in the Arab world as well? Because a lot of Arabs, I've spoken to many Arabs, and they say, how can we support the Palestinians? They can't even agree amongst themselves.
You see, Arabs seek excuses. Arabs, especially those who are loyal or who are allies of the United States of America, know exactly that the Palestinians are victims, and they know that they are supposed to support the Palestinians, but they are so cowardly, they are so weak within themselves that they come up with all sorts of excuses.
Doesn't sound very hopeful.
There is hope in the Arab masses. The Arab masses show great solidarity with the Palestinian cause, with Hamas in particular at the moment, because they do identify that Hamas is the movement that is most loyal to the cause today.
I mean, it could be argued that since Hamas took over last summer Gaza, that's only made the problems worse. It's actually made a negotiated deal even further away.
The idea of making things worse for the people in Gaza, as well as in the West Bank, is exactly to arrive at this conclusion that Hamas is responsible. But the Palestinian people who are suffering as a result do not blame Hamas. They know that this is happening because of the boycott, because of the sanctions that are imposed and led by the United States of America.
Well, let's look at boycott, sanctions. All this comes, of course, as Israel is intensifying its blockade on Gaza, blocking fuel supplies which are needed for electricity generation. Israel seems determined to squeeze the life out of Hamas.
They're going to fail, and they're making a very big mistake. Whenever Hamas is pressured, and this is what I tried to explain in my book, they come out of this trial, this calamity, much stronger, more credible, because they prove to the Palestinians and to the Arab and Muslim masses that they are unwilling to compromise when pressured in this way. They are not, they do not take in this sort of blackmail and this sort of pressure.
Well, that may be a political argument, but people are suffering in Gaza, aren't they, as a result of all this, as a result of Hamas's hard line. Hamas has brought this on itself. Gaza is suffering because of Hamas's position.
No government in the world could endure the sort of pressure that the government in Gaza has been through. But it is there, it is intact, it is still popular and credible, because the Palestinian people are fully aware that it is not Hamas to blame, but rather it is Israel, It's the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah, it's the United States of America, and it's the Arab government, especially the government of Egypt, who are unwilling to help them.
Well, let's try and disentangle some of that. Hamas isn't blameless, is it? Because in the end, it says it controls Gaza, yet it's unwilling to stop the rockets going into Israel. Those rocket attacks which are intensifying, Israel says. That's why it's had to take this action.
Why should Hamas work for Israel? Israel detains 12,000 Palestinians. Israel continues to detain and to arrest and to kill Palestinians in the West Bank as well as in Gaza. The incursions have been daily occurrences. Why should Hamas protect the Israelis in exchange for nothing while the Israelis continue to persecute the Palestinians?
Well, I suppose one argument is they should act actually to protect the people of Gaza, because unless they stop the rocketing, then conditions in Gaza will get worse.
Now remember that when Hamas won the election in January 2006, it was the Israelis and the Americans who took the initiative of imposing sanctions against the Palestinians for having made a democratic choice. And at the time, Hamas was not engaged in any military activity against the Israelis because it had agreed to give Mahmoud Abbas a chance by observing what they call a tahdiya, or a calming.
But unless Hamas acts against these groups, and presumably it knows where they are, these groups that are firing rockets, then there will be no end to the suffering in Gaza, will there?
Hamas will never act against what it considers to be legitimate resistance against the Israeli occupiers. Remember here, you need to start the story from the right moment in history. It is the Israelis who are persecuting the Palestinians. It's the Israelis who are occupying Palestinian lands and who are detaining 12,000 Palestinian prisoners. And Hamas said to the Israelis, let's talk about all of this. Now, you want the rockets to stop? They can come to an end. Release the prisoners, stop the incursions, withdraw from the territories occupied in 1967, and remove the settlers. The Israelis don't want to deal with Hamas and to achieve real peace.
2,000 rockets fired at the Israeli town of Sderot over the past 4 years. 2,000 rockets, the number going up all the time. Does that really help Hamas's cause?
Have you counted how many Israeli shells had fallen or have fallen or continue to fall on Gaza? How many Israeli bullets penetrated into the bodies of Palestinians in various towns in the West Bank? Come on. The Israelis are the ones who initiate the attacks and who refuse to stop the conflict.
That's the point, though. Someone has to take the first step, don't they?
It's the Israelis, because they are the occupying power. See, when you are the victim, you don't give up. You continue to struggle until the oppressor comes to the conclusion that their oppression is not paying off. Israeli oppression of the Palestinians will not pay off. The Israelis are making it even more difficult for themselves, for their future in the region, if they continue to oppress the Palestinians in Gaza.
So the Hamas sticks by its political principles, and the people of Gaza continue to go without things they need. They continue to go without the supplies they need.
See, don't blame Hamas because it is loyal to the Palestinian dream, my parents' dream, the dream of hundreds of thousands of refugees, millions even. Blame the Israelis who have stripped us of our land, the Israelis who deny our children in Gaza today everything that is necessary for life, and if they could deny them the air, they probably would have done so.
So there'll be no change in Hamas policy on the rockets?
The Israelis have to take the initiative of agreeing to negotiate a truce with Hamas. Once the Israelis come up with this, and there are a few Israeli former generals and security experts who have been telling Ehud Barak and Ehud Olmert that the way forward is not more killing of the Palestinians, but rather to negotiate a way out with Hamas itself.
But even countries in the Arab world want Hamas to stop the rocketing. Your neighbour there, Egypt, next to Gaza, they say that they want Hamas to stop those rocket attacks. They don't have much time for Hamas. Jordan hasn't got much time for Hamas. Kicked Hamas out, of course. That's why they had to move to Syria.
You know, the problem with these regimes is that they receive millions of dollars from the United States of America every year. Egypt receives $2 billion every year, and they hate to lose any of it. And this money, much of this money, goes to the pockets of those in charge of the government. So much corruption. Jordan lives on the aid that comes from overseas. It's not because of that Hamas is seeking to struggle or put up a resistance. It's because these regimes, first, are not sovereign. They don't represent their people. Thirdly, they rely on foreign aid in order to continue.
Well, Egypt could help you out quite a lot in Gaza, couldn't it? After all, it does provide some electricity generation to Gaza. It could provide more. It could remedy the gap that Israel has left by blocking fuel supplies to some Gaza.
Of course. Egypt can resolve the problem in Gaza, can bring an end to the suffering of the Palestinians. See, the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt is an entirely Egyptian-Palestinian crossing. And the Egyptians can open it, as they did open it when the pilgrims passed through. The moment the Egyptians provide electricity to the town of Rafah, or part of it, they could provide electricity for the entire Gaza Strip. Even the oil, the diesel, that is denied by the Israelis to the Palestinians today and ended up stopping the generator that provides Gaza City with electricity, comes from Egypt.
But they don't. Why not?
The Egyptians,
they won't help you.
They won't help because they want to keep on receiving the $2 billion bribe from the United States of America.
And they want Hamas to end the armed struggle.
You see, this is the point here. The democratic governments of the world, of the West, the United States of America and Western Europe, are corrupting these Arab regimes. These regimes that are dictators, they are tyrannical, they don't respect human rights, and they continue to receive support, financial, military, as well as political, in order to suppress their peoples.
Amnesty International say that fighting between the Palestinian groups has cost many lives in Gaza. Is that really worth it?
See, when you fight for a genuine cause, you have to continue to fight until you are free. You're fighting for freedom. You cannot live as a slave. See,
you can't take freedom, though, can you? The United Nations has warned what will happen if the armed struggle isn't renounced unless things change. They say virtually all of Gaza's population will become highly or totally dependent on humanitarian assistance.
Well, I'd rather you ask the United Nations why they have not been able to impose on Israel all these Security Council resolutions that Israel continues to trash and to ignore. The United Nations is controlled completely by the United States of America and its allies. And that's why the United Nations speaks whenever it likes, goes silent and becomes dumb whenever it likes.
Do you think Hamas has popular support in Gaza? And if they do, why did they need to commit what Amnesty says are grave human rights abuses, both in the takeover of Gaza and in the aftermath?
Hamas is more popular today than when on the day it took over in Gaza. And
Is that really the case?
Yes, that's the case.
No, well, let me just challenge that. A recent opinion poll shows that 39% of Palestinians trust Fatah, only 16% backing for Hamas. And that's in line with other polls. That was done in December in both Gaza and the West Bank. Almost 1,000 Palestinians were asked.
These polls were conducted by the same agencies that conducted the polls that expected that Fatah was going to win the elections of January 2006. These agencies are funded by NGOs or semi-NGOs in the United States of America and Europe in order to create a sort of a public opinion. Rather than reflect public opinion, they try and model, they try and create public opinion, design public opinion.
But again, people can't eat politics. Aren't those polls right? Because after all, they reflect the fact that life has not got better in Gaza since last summer. What has Hamas done to deliver?
Life is very tough in the Gaza Strip. But there is more to life than eating and drinking. There is
Can you tell that to a mother who's struggling to find food for their children?
Of course, you only need to watch these mothers and these children and men speaking on various Arab satellite stations, including the Al-Aqsa satellite station that belongs to Hamas, where they insist, despite all the pain, they insist they have the right to defend themselves and that they were not going to give up. See, by denying people food, by denying them drink, by denying them a decent life, you cannot subjugate them and force them to become slaves. And we are not the only nation in the history of humanity that continue to insist on our freedom. The Vietnamese did it before, the South African people did it before, the French who liberated themselves from the Nazis did it before us, and we will one day a nation free from Zionism.
But it's Hamas that is doing this. In the end, if Hamas renounced the armed struggle and started negotiations on the recognition of Israel, this would stop. People would have a better life immediately.
Hamas is an expression of the people's will.
Is it really, though? That's the point, isn't it? Not according to these opinion polls.
Of course, go back to January 2006. Hamas was elected by the majority of the Palestinian people. Why do you think we had all these conspiracies, all these plots against Hamas?
But the Hamas government didn't work well. The conditions worsened when it was in control in the West Bank, and conditions have worsened now since the violent takeover in Gaza.
I bet you if the same pressure and the same sanctions were imposed on the United Kingdom, the United Kingdom government would find it difficult to operate. But you won't give up. You see, you don't give up because the Israelis and the Americans and some of those who work for them say to you, we are not going to accept this democratic choice. You have to fight for it. It's your freedom. It's your free choice.
George Bush said just the other day, Hamas has delivered nothing but misery to the people of Gaza. He's right, isn't he?
The misery came from George Bush. It's George Bush who did not recognize the democratic choice of the Palestinian people. A democratically elected president in in the United States of America insists that a government elected by the people of Palestine that produces Hamas will not be recognized. Who is bringing misery upon the Palestinians?
If the other Arab states won't help, is Hamas looking towards Iran? There have been lots of persistent reports that Iran is helping in Gaza.
Iran is sympathetic, and Iran sought to support the government that was formed after Hamas was elected. But Iran is far away from the region. Help is needed from Egypt. Help is needed from Jordan. The immediate neighbors. These are the Arab immediate neighbors who can provide delivery or deliverance for the Palestinians.
The head of the Israeli Security Service, Yuval Diskin, says that they've got evidence that Iranian specialists are inside Gaza helping to improve rocketry. That's why the rockets are flying further. They're also doing military training.
It's an insult to the Palestinians to say that they need the Iranians or Iranian experts to be able to resist and to fight for their freedom.
So it's not true?
It's not true, of course it's
Definitely not true, even though there are persistent reports.
You see, the Israelis and the Americans seek to convince public opinion that there are two camps. On one camp, there are the Americans and the Israelis and the so-called moderates, and on the other side, there's Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas. And that is simply for political reasons. To insist that, to try and prove that this theory is correct by claiming that there are Iranian experts or there is special Iranian assistance to Hamas is simply creating lies. It's not true at all.
The Hamas leader, Khaled Mashal, who'll be in that meeting in Damascus that you're going to, has praised Iran's President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. He praises him for the courage, I quote, in having dismissed the Nazi Holocaust, the murder of 6 million Jews, as a myth. Is that helpful?
No, it's not helpful. And I criticized Khaled Mashal and I strongly criticized Ahmadinejad. Actually, without the Holocaust, there could never have been Israel. The reason why there is Israel today, the reason why we are oppressed in our land and outside our land is because of the Holocaust. Before the Holocaust, the majority of the Jews did not want to be embroiled in the Zionist project. It was the Holocaust that convinced many of them that creating a Jewish home in Palestine was the way forward. So you cannot deny the Holocaust because it doesn't explain history.
In November 2004, you told this programme, you told Hard Talk, that you were prepared to be a suicide bomber if necessary. You said, sacrificing myself for Palestine was a noble cause. It's the straight way to pleasing my God. I'd do it if I had the opportunity. Is that still your view?
Well, I'm glad that today in Palestine, these sort of operations are no longer necessary. The Palestinians have been able to develop new tactics and to be able to make use of whatever technology that is available to them. You see, the objective here...
If it were necessary, though, would you still support that?
The objective here is, of course, if it is... You see, if the Israelis are killing the Palestinians day and night, and if the Hippocratic world community does not give a damn about Palestinian lives, the Palestinians have the right to respond to Israeli atrocities with whatever means that are available to them.
You do it, if necessary.
Luckily, I'm not in Palestine, but if I were in Palestine and if I were subjected to the sort of oppression that the Israelis subject the Palestinians to, I'd resort to any means to liberate my people.
Including blowing yourself up, including becoming a suicide bomber?
I'd resort to any means in order to liberate my people.
During the course of the past 20-odd minutes, what have we heard? We've heard about splits in the Palestinian cause. We've heard of a lack of compromise. You'd argue a lack of compromise on both sides. Where is the optimism coming from? Where is any hope coming from?
Well, if we address it a bit philosophically, history tells us that whenever an oppressed nation is persecuted in the manner that the Israelis are persecuting the Palestinians at the moment, turning the Gaza Strip into the biggest concentration camp in the history of humanity, even surpassing the fascists and the Nazis by what they're doing to the Palestinians, that means deliverance is at the doorstep. That means that very soon, hopefully, the Palestinians will be free.
Dr. Azam Tamimi, thank you very much for being my guest on Hard Talk today.
Hello there. After all the wet weather around of late, I'm sure you'll be pleased to hear that today is going to be a drier day all round, but there's yet another Met weather warning out for today. It's for the risk of some icy roads. That's thanks to clear skies developing overnight. You can see the expanse of the blue, a pretty frosty old start across Scotland, many major towns as it is. Temperatures -3 to start the day. But the rain from yesterday affecting southern Scotland and northern England here certainly gives a risk of some icy stretches, especially on any untreated surfaces. Elsewhere, the notice temperatures well below what we've seen for the past few days. A chilly start, but the good news is it will be a sunny and dry start to the day. Further west, though, back into more cloudy skies, but again, you'll notice here the temperature's milder, 7 there in Plymouth. Cloud too around western fringes of Wales. That's because there is yet another weather front waiting in the wings, already starting to bring outbreaks of light patchy rain towards Northern Ireland first thing this morning. Cloud you'll see across western parts of Scotland, western England, parts of Wales. As we move through the day, that will gradually tend to nudge its way east. Sunshine always holding on to the eastern side, but here temperatures really struggling to recover. Temperatures 5 or 6, but further west in this band of rain, yet more mild air coming in. Now overnight, Tuesday into Wednesday, that wet weather steams its way east in towards the North Sea, and yes, back into the cloudy, dull, damp skies that we've been having over the past few days. Again, it will be mild temperatures 12 to 13, with outbreaks of rain heavy at times for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Now the rain band moves its way south come Thursday, which means a different feel to the weather. Again, winds coming from the northwest, quite blustery, a mixture of sunshine and showers. Some of these showers will be heavy with the risk of hail or thunder at times. Temperatures in the north 5 or 6, in the south 9 to 10.
Covering the big stories, talking to the top politicians, experiencing events at first hand. Join me, Matt Fry, for a brand new programme based here in Washington and drawing on the best reporting of the BBC from around the globe. BBC World News America, weeknights here on BBC News 24.
You can have all the technology and science in the world, yet sometimes all you need is one call. Join me, Kirsty Young, for brand new Crime Watch, Wednesday at 9 on BBC One.
Deprived of your senses, how would you feel?
There was no daylight at all.
I think I'm hitting a wall in my mind.
Am I still alive?
I'm hallucinating.
It got really frightening.
I don't really want to be here.
The blackness was palpable. There was nothing there to confirm human existence.
Horizon explores the dark side of science. Total Isolation, tonight at 9 on BBC Two.
Turmoil on Asia's stock markets. Seoul and Mumbai suspend trading as share prices keep tumbling. Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama clash in a heated debate ahead of the South Carolina primary. New Zealand bids farewell to a hero, a state funeral for the explorer Sir Edmund Hillary. This is The World Today from BBC News. Welcome, I'm Karen Giannoni.
And I'm Sally Bundock. Also to come in World Business Report. Making sense of the market slump will go live to Tokyo and Singapore for the latest on the global share sell-off. And a national champion at last. France's GDF and Suez may come a step closer to a mega merger.
Our top stories. Seoul and Mumbai have suspended trading on their stock markets as share prices continue to tumble across Asia. After morning trading, Japan's main index was down nearly 4.5%. Japan's government says it's not planning to intervene. It says the problems stem from the United States economy and Japan cannot act alone. The main European stock markets yesterday recorded the biggest one-day falls since the September the 11th attacks on America. Well, Sally is here with some perspective on what's been happening happening. Sally, some really tumultuous past few hours.
Absolutely. What a trading week it has been, and it's very significant as well that the US markets haven't had a chance to react to any of this yet. So we're keeping a very close eye on what's going on, obviously, and trying to make sense of it as the story unfolds. And let's now go live to our teams who are right there watching all the action, starting with Chris Hogg, who is in Tokyo to begin with. Chris, we're just kicking off now into the final hour of trading in Japan. What's happening at the moment?
Well, any hopes that we might see some kind of significant rebound after these very heavy losses in the morning trading here really haven't materialized yet. The index is still down around 4%. It's been hovering around there for most of the day here. I think the biggest problem is the fact that the US market was closed overnight, was closed on Monday. That's meant there's been no direction for people. It's very hard for them to judge what market sentiment is in the United States, and that's left investors here, it would seem, pretty confused.
Now, in terms of the companies that have been damaged the most, I presume, is it the usual suspects, Chris, those that rely heavily on America for their profits?
It is. It's the big car companies, Honda, Toyota. It's the electronics giants like Sony. Those companies that rely heavily on exports to the US economy for their balance sheets, they're having a hard time. Also, the fact, of course, that we've got a very strong yen at the moment. That makes their foreign earnings weaker. When things are rough in the financial markets in Asia, a lot of people go to a safe place to put their money, Japanese government bonds. That raises the Japanese yen, the currency here, and that's making it worse for these Japanese companies. Now, the Prime Minister of Japan has tried to talk up the share prices. He's come out and said that he's still optimistic about the Japanese economy, but even he has acknowledged that there are weaknesses. And the Bank of Japan governor in the last couple of hours has admitted that the US subprime mortgage crisis, that has caused greater problems for Japanese companies than perhaps his officials initially expected. So again, we've seen bank stocks falling as well.
All right, thank you very much, Chris. Let's go to Rico now in Singapore. Rico, we're hearing that Mumbai, they've had to suspend trading and elsewhere. What's happening at the moment?
Well, Sally, after the market's lunchtime break, the situation has gone from bad to worse. Asian shares are extending their retreat at this hour. As you mentioned, Seoul and Mumbai suspending their trading. Let's start off with India, which has opened about 30 minutes ago, plunging 9.5%, and as a result, trading has been halted. And as a rule in India, if markets fall by about 10%, trading is suspended for about an hour. So trading should resume in about 27 minutes' time. But it's getting worse for the Hong Kong stock market, Sally, now down about 8%. China is plummeting by 7%. HSBC, one of the key components of the Hang Seng Index, falling to lows not seen since October 2003. While in China, trading of Bank of China shares have been suspended. No reason has been given, but there's speculation that this is tied to a Hong Kong media report that the bank has accumulated major losses due to the US subprime crisis. Seoul stocks also being suspended, lower by 5% at this hour to an 8-month low. Banks, shipbuilders, and technology are being sold down in heavy trading. As for Australia, earlier down by 4%, now down by 6%. Falling for the 11th consecutive session. Other markets in the region, the Philippines, Singapore, Malaysia, all in negative territory. And one analyst I spoke with earlier said that fundamentals in the region have not deteriorated as much as implied by the market slump, and there will likely be, maybe over the next few days, a potential technical rise in the markets.
All right, a technical rise. But Rico, just give us a sense of how people are feeling. I know that you and Chris have been talking to traders and investors. I mean, is there a sense of panic? If you look at today's papers, there's just massive, dramatic headlines about a panic sell-off. Is that the feeling or not?
The panic, there's no such word being used right now in the markets because basically, Sally, the general consensus among many of the economists here in Asia is that the region can indeed escape a U.S. recession. They say China and India are key components for the region to keep on growing. China is still expected to expand by 10% this year, and India 8 to 9%. And what? There are a combined 2.5 billion strong population that they say will keep Asia afloat and insulated from a major slowdown in the U.S. Sally.
Thanks very much indeed, Rico. And just to add to some perspective on this story, and thanks to you, Chris, as well, in Tokyo. But just to say as well, before we move on, that if you look at what Shanghai did last year, that market rose by 96%. It's down so far this year by 10%. Hong Kong last year rose by nearly 40%. It's down at the moment this year by sort of 21%. So let's keep all of this in perspective. Just to look at the States at the moment, futures that are trading in out-of-hours trade indicate that when the American markets open, they could be down by over 4%. The initial opening slide will have a top market analyst in World Business Report in 20 minutes to give us a real sense of perspective on all of this and an indication as to where America is headed when those markets open later. Also, just to say, when we do join us for World Business Report, we're going to look at the planned merger as well between Gaz de France and Suez, which could take a step forward or back today. That's one of our big stories as well. A court is to rule in a case in which GDF's management has accused its own works council of trying to block the process. Meanwhile, workers from the French utility company are being called on to join another protest against the government's planned pension reform. So we've got that and all the other business stories, as there are more stories other than the market turmoil, believe me. So join me in 20 minutes if you can for all of that. I'll see you later.
Thank you very much, Sally. The President of Uganda, Yoweri Museveni, and the former UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan are expected in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi, on Tuesday in separate mediation efforts to bring an end to the crisis over last month's disputed presidential election. On Monday, at least 7 more people were killed as the post-election violence continued. So far, both sides remain at loggerheads, with the opposition demanding a rerun of the election. Israel is preparing to open a border crossing to let some fuel and medical supplies into the Gaza Strip after international criticism of its 4-day blockade. The fuel will resupply Gaza's power station, which shut down on Sunday. Israeli officials said the rocket attacks by Palestinian militants that prompted the blockade had dwindled. Food prices could rise for the rest of the century because of a scarcity of land and water. A new British report says that while a growing world population and demand for biofuels have pushed prices up recently, a shortage of arable land and water could prove an even bigger long-term challenge. Cuban officials say over 8 million people cast their vote in parliamentary elections to show their support for the country's one-party system. The future of President Fidel Castro, however, remains unclear. The Cuban leader had to hand over to his brother after emergency stomach surgery 2 years ago. 2 of the Democratic Party candidates for the American presidency, Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, have clashed during a televised debate ahead of a primary election in South Carolina. Senator Obama accused Senator Clinton of saying anything to get elected, while she said it was hard to debate with someone who never took responsibility for any vote he cast.
It all started with smiles for this latest Democratic presidential debate. Perhaps a time for a united front on this, the day commemorating Martin Luther King's birthday. But soon, the accusations started flying.
When Senator Clinton said, or President Clinton says that I wasn't opposed to the war from the start, or says it's a fairy tale that I opposed the war, that is simply not true. When Senator Clinton or President Clinton asserts that I said that the Republicans had had better economic policies since 1980. That is not the case.
The tensions between these 2 leading contenders have been simmering, but now the gloves came off.
While I was working on those streets, watching those folks see their jobs shipped overseas, you were a corporate lawyer sitting on the board of Walmart. I was fighting these fights. I was fighting these fights.
Proof that the campaign is becoming increasingly bitter, with the Obama camp claiming they're now fighting 2 Clintons, not 1.
You talked about Ronald Reagan being a transformative political leader. I did not mention his name.
Your husband did.
Well, I'm here. He's not.
Okay, well, I can't tell who I'm running against sometimes.
Hillary Clinton was not pulling punches either, accusing her rival of constantly shifting his position.
Senator Obama, it is very difficult having a straight-up debate with you because you never take responsibility for any vote, and that has been a pattern. You in the Illinois state legislature, just a minute.
At times, the audience may have forgotten that in South Carolina, it's a three-way fight.
What I want to say first is, are there 3 people in this debate, not 2?
The growing hostility may in fact help John Edwards. The tone of the campaign has certainly changed, but neither Barack Obama nor Hillary Clinton can afford to alienate the party supporters. Jonathan Beale, BBC News, Washington.
You're watching The World Today from BBC News. Coming up, the very latest international sport and the Croatian theatre play that's entered the record books 40 years and still its original cast. Let's take a closer look at the news around the UK this morning. Hundreds of flood alerts have been issued across the country, including 15 severe flood warnings. People in Huddersfield and Leeds have been forced to leave their homes because of rising river levels. Parts of Gloucestershire, Lancashire and Cumbria are also on alert, and the Environment Agency says there's more rain on the way. The trial of a British man who jumped from the 4th floor of his hotel balcony with the 2 children in his arms has begun on the Greek island of Crete. John Hogan's ex-wife Natasha told the court that their marriage was under immense strain at the time. A verdict is expected on Wednesday. The Chancellor has told the House of Commons that government plans to turn Northern Rock's loans into bonds are the best option. Alistair Darling said converting the loans is the best way to protect taxpayers and savers, and it would be irresponsible to rule out the temporary nationalisation of Northern Rock. Cookery lessons are to be made compulsory in all secondary schools in England to try to curb obesity. It's hoped the cooking lessons will encourage pupils to adopt a healthier lifestyle, but teaching unions have raised questions over funding, facilities and staffing. Well, let's have a quick look at today's weather. Well, it's likely to be a frosty start in eastern parts of the country, and there is more misery in store in northern and western regions where it's expected to be wet and windy all day. And as we were saying, severe flood warnings are still in effect across England and Wales. You're watching The World Today. Let's bring you up to date with our headlines this hour. The stock markets in Seoul and Mumbai have suspended trading as share prices keep tumbling across Asia. Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama clash in a heated debate ahead of the South Carolina primary election. Coming up in World Business Report, a national champion at last. France's GDF and Suez may come a step closer to a mega merger. New Zealand has said farewell to its national hero, the mountaineer Sir Edmund Hillary, who, together with Tenzing Norgay, was the first to climb Mount Everest. Well, the BBC's Nick Bryant is in Auckland for us. Nick, this final farewell, a truly national and international event.
Yeah, it was a very quintessentially New Zealand affair, but a very global event as well, because alongside his family, alongside the New Zealand Prime Minister Helen Clark, were representatives from the Sherpa community in Nepal, and indeed representatives of that 1953 expedition, which ended up, of course, and culminated with that remarkable climb to the summit of Everest. It was a celebration of a life, of a hero, but a very humble man. Who has won the admiration of the New Zealand population, not just because of what he achieved that day in climbing Everest, but the way he's conducted his life ever since. He's devoted his life really to humanitarian causes and exploration, and the cause that was dearest to his heart, of course, was helping the Nepalese people. He did that by helping them build hospitals, helping them train doctors, helping them build schools. His legacy is very much alive in the mountains of the Himalayas.
An extraordinary mix of people there at his funeral, Nick, and ever since Sir Edmund's death, such a remarkable number of tributes coming in from all over the world.
Yeah, there really have been. This funeral was attended not just by the Nepalese dignitaries, but dignitaries from all over the world. The mountaineering fraternity was represented here in very big numbers. There was one notable absentee, it has to be said, and it has caused controversy here in New Zealand. There wasn't a member of the British royal family here. You'll remember the news seeped out that Sir Edmund had climbed Everest on the very morning that Queen Elizabeth II was crowned. It ushered in the new Elizabethan age. That front page exclusive in the Times newspaper sent via code from Nepal so they would get the news before anybody else. Well, the expectation here was that a member of the British royal family would make the trip to New Zealand. That didn't happen. The Queen was represented instead by the Governor-General of New Zealand. It has caused controversy. Snub was the headline in a paper the other day. To placate those complaints, perhaps, Buckingham Palace has offered the Hillary family the rare honour of a memorial service at Windsor Castle in April, and that does seem to have rectified some of the damage that's been caused by the royal absence at this funeral service.
Nick Bryant in Auckland in New Zealand, many thanks. Theatre-goers in the former Yugoslav Republic of Croatia would be forgiven for thinking they've seen it all before. A play with a record-breaking run has proved so popular that it's just celebrated its 40th birthday. And it's not just the plot that's remained the same. Helen Fawkes has more.
It's not quite the red carpet reception that most celebrities expect. These are two of the most famous actors in Croatia, but they arrive for the 40th birthday performance by public transport because their show is based on an incident that happens on a tram. The play, called Exercises in Style, has been put on in the capital Zagreb since 1968 by the original cast.
I'm not really aware that my whole life has passed in those exercises in style, and I have to admit that I'm really excited because it is incredible that we have played it for 40 years.
The audience may have changed over the years, and even the country has changed from Yugoslavia to Croatia. But the actors have remained the same. It's become a cult show.
I have to admit that I saw it only once before. This is really a world record, 40 years of a play which always finds a place in present time. And I guess that made it last so long.
There were celebrations as the show is now in the record books. Judging by its marathon of past performances, it could be some time before the curtain eventually comes down on this play. Helen Fawkes, BBC News, Sarajevo.
Well, now on The World Today, let's take a look at the stories grabbing your attention on our BBC website. Let's first go to Thailand, where flight attendants want a new soap opera band. The air hostess war focuses on a married pilot having an affair with a stewardess on his plane, but the union representing aircrew says it shows them in an unrealistic and immoral light. Heavy rain and flooding have caused problems in northern England and Wales, forcing the closure of key road and rail routes. Dozens of homes and businesses were flooded. Schools and shops are being closed. Heavy snowfall has also hit parts of northeast England and Scotland. And finally, top accolades for Hollywood film stars Lindsay Lohan and Eddie Murphy. Both have been nominated for the LA-based Razzie Awards, which honour the year's worst Hollywood films. Murphy gets 5 nods for his film Norbit, and Lohan picks up 2 for her thriller I Know Who Killed Me. Both movies are up for worst film. Well, more details on all those stories and the rest of the news on the BBC's website, so do check it out. Now time to catch up with all the sports, starting with tennis. And the defending champion Serena Williams is out of this year's Australian Open Tennis Championship. Williams, at the far end, was beaten in straight sets by the third-seeded Jelena Jankovic of Serbia in a match that swung one way and then the other. Williams, the 7th seed, put up a stout fight to cling on to her title, but in the end Jankovic proved just too good and moved through to the semi-finals 6-3, 6-4. Jankovic will now play Justine Henin or Maria Sharapova for a place in Saturday's final. To football, and Liverpool needed a late goal from England international Peter Crouch to avoid a home defeat against Aston Villa on Monday. Liverpool supporters vented their anger on the club's American owners Tom Hicks and George Gillett during the game, but there was something to cheer about when Israeli international Yossi Benayoun put them ahead. But Villa scored twice in 2 second-half minutes before Crouch came to the rescue late on. At the Africa Cup of Nations, wins on Monday for Mali, Ivory Coast and Morocco, who proved far too powerful for Namibia and thrashed them 5-1. That was in Group A, the same group as host nation Ghana, who opened their campaign with a 2-1 win over Guinea on Sunday. It was a great win for Morocco, with Soufiane Aloudi scoring 3 first-half goals. The other 2 games were in Group B and both ended 1-0. Freddy Kanouté scored the only goal from the penalty spot as Mali beat Benin, while Salomon Kalou's goal earned Ivory Coast victory over fellow favourites Nigeria. Both the big teams in Group B had chances to win the match. Nigeria coming close when Taye Taiwo hit the post from a free kick. Replays underline just how stranded Boubacar Barry was in the Ivory Coast goal. But Chelsea's striker Kalou was the match winner. After the ball wasn't cleared by the Nigerian defence, he jinked his way into the penalty area to calmly slot home and give the Ivorians a victory that even at this early stage makes them the clear favourites to win Group B. The double world champion Fernando Alonso has given Renault's 2008 Formula One car an encouraging track debut ahead of next week's formal launch. Alonso, who's returned to Renault after a troubled season with Mercedes McLaren, completed the 39 laps of the Valencia circuit in the R28 car after being delayed by morning fog. Well, that's all the very latest sport for you. More later. Now, it's called word-of-mouth advertising. Always on the lookout for new ways to get their message across, advertisers are recruiting London taxi drivers to spread the word about their products. Some cabbies are being offered incentives like free holidays in return for telling their passengers about the delights of the places they visit. David Chazan reports.
The way a lot of London taxi drivers talk, you might think that's what they get paid for.
It's always nice to try and talk about different
Well,
things.
some now do, at least in kind.
Or Tony Blair or Gordon
The
Brown
city's
or whoever,
famously
you know,
gabby cabbies are renowned for dispensing knowledge on anything from politics to football. And many of their cabs are already vehicles for advertising. But now advertisers are rewarding drivers for giving passengers a sales spiel from behind the wheel. Adrian talks for Thailand, or rather the Thai Tourist Authority.
So people get in the bank, you talk about the weather, the football, whatever, and then it's been anywhere on holiday lately, driver. Well, as it happens, I went out to Thailand this year. I got sent there by TTA, paid for, and I'll tell them all about it if they want to listen.
Adrian says he isn't being paid, but he has been given a couple of free holidays. Well, I found Adrian's pitch quite entertaining, and I can see how conjuring up those images of sunny Bangkok could brighten up a cab ride in grey London. But I can also see how some people might find the idea of a taxi driver who's, well, a talking advert, quite irritating.
I'd rather he just do the job that I've employed him to do for the duration of the taxi ride, and he just take me to where I want to go rather than give me a barrage of sales pitches on foreign holidays or whatever it might be.
I wouldn't say I would find it irritating, but I wouldn't believe in all the information that I'm giving.
The transport authorities say taxi drivers shouldn't be acting as advertising agents, and they're going to clarify that to them and to advertisers. So if you think your cabbie's a rent-a-gob, just remember he's only there to take you for a ride. David Chazan, BBC News.
Well, stay tuned for the world today, coming up in a moment.
Hello there. Well, it's a real topsy-turvy week of weather after all the cloud, rain and snow of yesterday. Today we see something a little quieter with regards to the weather. Certainly a chilly start to the day, and that does mean the risk of some icy roads out and about. A Met Office weather warning out for this, and you can see the reason why. Clear skies overnight, temperatures falling rapidly, and that means a widespread frost developing. -3 in Aberdeen and in Newcastle, and it's for southern Scotland and northern England where we saw all the rain yesterday and the very cold temperatures to start today. Well, we've got the greatest risk of some icy stretches on any untreated surfaces. A better story in the south, temperatures 6 in London with some sunshine, certainly a very pleasant start to the day. Further south and west though, more cloud started to nudge its way in and bringing with it milder air, 7 there in Plymouth. The cloud just started to make its way into western parts of Wales and also into Northern Ireland, bringing with it outbreaks of rain and drizzle, and it's really not a very promising start here. Here the exception to the dry, fine weather. As we move through the day on Tuesday, we'll gradually see this new Atlantic front bringing cloud and rain in from the west. So the sunshine being increasingly interrupted by more hazy sunshine as upper cloud spills in, but always the east holding on to the best of the sunshine. Here, though, temperatures really struggling to rise after a very chilly, frosty start to the day. Temperatures 6 or 7 for many parts of the Midlands and northern England. Hazy sunshine as we head through the afternoon in Manchester. Still holding on to the sunshine for Newcastle, but top temperatures at best only 5 here and 5-2 in Aberdeen. Western parts of Scotland, you can see cloud and rain spreading in, and also the wind starting to pick up from the west and staying rather dull, damp and wet across Northern Ireland too. Rain making its way into western parts of Wales elsewhere. A rather cloudy, dull and damp day, and a similar story for the south and west. You can see the winds coming from this very mild direction. Temperatures 10 there in Plymouth. For the west, it's more cloudy with outbreaks of rain and drizzle, but for the east, staying hold of that sunny day on Tuesday. All change, as I said, after with the flip-flop weather come Wednesday. It's cloudy, it's dull, it's damp, but again, at least it will be mild with the air coming up from the south and west. Temperatures 10, 11, maybe even 13 in the far south, with the heaviest rain always across Scotland and northern parts of Ireland. Come Thursday, this rain band sinks its way south, just starting to clear the southeast corner as we move through the day, but on Thursday you'll notice a much colder feel to the weather, some blustery northwesterly winds bringing with it the rain, sleet and snow, 4 or 5 in the north, 9 to 10 in the south.
Wherever you go, you can take BBC News with you. Just text NEWS to 81010 to access the latest stories from the BBC News website on your mobile phone, or go to bbc.co.uk/news. BBC News, whenever you need to know.
Alone on Bodmin Moor, men can be men.
The modern world, it's back there.
Be who they want to be.
I don't want to be the same as everybody else.
Do what they want to do.
Do enjoy doing my thing.
And eat what they want to eat.
All full of badger and lovely things.
Wonderland continues with the man who eats badgers and other strange tales from Bodmin Moor. Tomorrow at 9:50 on BBC Two.
There is a guard with us, a German soldier bristling with weapons. He switches on a pocket torch. We're expecting shouts and threats, but instead he starts asking us, very courteously, in German and in Pidgin, if we have any money or watches to give him, since we won't be needing them anymore.
In February 1944, Primo Levi entered Auschwitz. This is his story. Primo, starring Anthony Sher, Sunday at 7:40 on BBC 4.
The art of Spain speaks louder than words.
It's as if the volume has been turned up.
Of violence and destruction.
The architectural equivalent of a head on a stick.
Conflict and repression.
This was a country starting to devour itself.
Andrew Graham Dixon captures the turbulent history of a nation through its art.
It's a journey that leads to the darkest and most fascinating recesses of the Spanish imagination.
The Art of Spain, coming soon to BBC 4.
Hello, this is The World Today from BBC News. In a moment, the World Business Report with Sally, but first a summary of our main news. Stock markets in Asia have fallen sharply. Trading on both the Mumbai and Seoul stock exchanges has been suspended after large falls. Two of the Democratic Party candidates for the American presidency, Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, have clashed during a televised debate ahead of a primary election in South Carolina. New Zealand has said farewell to its national hero, the mountaineer Sir Edmund Hillary, who together with Tenzing Norgay was the first to climb Mount Everest. Israel is preparing to open a border crossing to let some fuel and medical supplies into the Gaza Strip after international criticism of its 4-day blockade. Well, those are the very latest headlines from BBC World News. Now for the latest financial news with Sally.
Hello and a very warm welcome. This is World Business Report. I'm Sally Bundock. Here are the headlines. The only way is down. Markets continue their slump following a massive global sell-off on Monday.
Here in Asia, no recovery in sight so far as the Indian and Korean stock markets fall so much. Trading has been suspended.
And Europe sees its worst fall since September the 11th, 2001.
And a national champion at last. France's GDF and Suez may come a step closer to a mega merger. Well, let's all take a deep breath. It would seem there is no respite for the markets today. Shares across Asia are plunging for a second day in a row. It follows the massive sell-offs we saw across the globe on Monday as fears of a US recession loom ever large. Let's go straight to our teams around the world, starting with Singapore. Rico Hizon, who's been watching every single swing and must be exhausted. Tell us what's happening at the moment.
Well, this is the only time I can get to smile when I talk to you. Yeah, plunging 9.5%, and as a result, trading has been halted. And as a rule in India, if markets fall by about 10%, trading is suspended for about an hour. Trading has also been stopped in Seoul, stocks extending their losses, lower now by 5% to an 8-month low. You have banks, shipbuilders, and technology issues being sold down in heavy trading. And it's getting worse for Hong Kong, Sally, now down by 8%, and China is plummeting by 7%. HSBC is plunging to lows not seen since October 2003. Australia down earlier by just 4%, now lower by 6%, falling for the 12th consecutive session. Other markets also in the red, the Philippines, Singapore, Malaysia, and Taiwan. And earlier, I spoke to Savant Sebastian, equity economist at Commonwealth Securities, who says that the current bloodbath in Asia is due to the region's perceived reliance on the U.S. economy.
We are seeing that Asia, particularly Japan, relies a lot on the US market, and in turn that will have a big impact on the rest of Asia as well. So if the US government just stands by and lets the US go into a recession, it certainly will not be good on a global scale, and that's really what's being factored in with these markets at the present time. We are seeing P/E ratios in Australia now down to the cheapest levels in 17 years.
And Sally, one other analyst I spoke with earlier said that fundamentals have not deteriorated here in Asia as much as implied by this market slump, and there will likely be a tactical reaction to the overselling very soon. Sally.
All right, well, let's have a look now at some of the other issues affecting these markets, other than, of course, the worries about the US. Reports about Bank of China emerging yesterday that it's been exposed to the subprime crisis. How's that impacting trade today?
In a major way. You have Bank of China shares being suspended. So far, no reason has been given. That's why the uncertainty in the markets. But there is speculation that this is tied to a Hong Kong media report that the bank has accumulated major losses due to the U.S. subprime crisis. Still, analysts say that it's nothing that investors should be worried about.
You had the reports that the Bank of China might be cutting subprimes. I want to stand on that on a moment, okay, because as usual, the rumors are much worse than the reality. We've just done our figures, and if we take worst possible case, okay, that accounts for 0.3, 1/3 of 1% of its total assets. Nothing.
Nothing. And amid that suspension, Sally, all the major banks have been sold off, from Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, Communications Bank, and China Construction Bank. Sally, back to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Rico, for that update. Well, if we now take a look at how things will go in Europe, of course, it was a seriously difficult day for traders yesterday at the start of the trading week. Let's join Aruna Iyengar now, who's at the London Stock Exchange with the latest. Aruna, you've got the sea of red there behind you. Today, it's not going to be easy either, is it?
It isn't, actually. Analysts are actually saying they can't really see the bottom of this at the moment because they're looking for a catalyst that would turn the market around, but at the moment they don't see it. As you can see, shares in Europe down around 6%. That was the biggest percentage slide since September the 11th, 2001. Fears of a US recession and more write-downs in the financial sector are spurring that market down. The DAX, as you can see, very heavily down at 7.5%. The slide as a whole wiped out $350 billion of value on European exchanges. The spectre of the slowdown on economic growth hit basic resources shares. The steelmaker ArcelorMittal was down around 11% and a miner, BHP Billiton, down around 10%. Also, financials were very badly hit. Dutch group ING, Allianz, AXA, UBS, all big banks down really large amounts there, down around 10%. We've also been hearing from the billionaire investor George Soros, who says the world is facing its worst financial crisis since World War II. So, you know, nothing too bad there. He says that US is threatened with a recession, and he's given that interview to the Austrian Daily Standard. Now, some analysts are taking comfort from the prospect of falling US interest rates. Rates are expected to fall to 3.5% from 4.25% on January the 30th. So analysts are hoping that that will give a spur to the market. Sally.
All right, thanks very much indeed, Aruna. And certainly the European markets are expected to remain incredibly nervous until the markets in the US start to trade, which is about midday European time. Of course, they were shut yesterday for Martin Luther King Day. What a day to be closed. What will happen when they reopen? Will we see a dramatic slide or some calm amidst the storm? Out of hours futures trading in the US at the moment indicate the S&P 500, the broader market, could open down by over 4.5%. Michelle Fleury in New York takes a look ahead.
Here in New York, it could be a bumpy start to the week. The main indices were closed on Monday for a national holiday. Well, traders may have been glad they stayed away from their desks on Monday, but Tuesday could still offer some sharp spills as fears of a US recession continues to weigh on investors. Even the US government's tax relief plan to revive the economy failed to lift spirits when it was discussed last Friday. The Dow fell, ending the week down 4%. Many are now looking to the Federal Reserve, America's central bank, to possibly lower interest rates ahead of its scheduled meeting. Now, the markets will get a break from economic news this Tuesday. There are no major reports due, but one of the big names in the financial sector is turning in its report card. Bank of America is expected to report a profit and also possibly more write-downs. Like its peers, Bank of America is trying to figure out its exposure to the deteriorating assets backed by mortgages. The bank also recently bought up America's biggest mortgage company, Countrywide. Now, one rare bright spot, though, might come after the markets have actually closed for the day. That's when tech giant Apple reports. For now, though, that's all from New York.
Looking to Apple for a glimmer of hope there. Well, let's now get some more perspective from Bronwyn Curtis, Chief Economist at Arch Financial Products. Good to see you again, Bronwyn. Hearing there from Michelle that the Fed might cut rates ahead of its next meeting, which is the end of this month. Do you think that's likely? I know a lot of people would like that to happen.
Well, I think the markets already expect 0.5% from the Fed at the end of the month. If they do it earlier, we might see more panic. We already have hit the panic buttons. Investors want liquidity. They want cash. They want defensive stocks, if you look at them.
Gold, perhaps.
Well, gold,
Swiss franc.
perhaps. But if you look just in the stock market, you know, anything that's at a risk of earnings being lower, like software and so on, has been sold off. Well, things that are defensive, like utilities, have been, you know, really, you know, much higher. I mean, the differential, the whole market's going down, but the differential between these stocks is rising as well.
Now, tell us about this panic button that was hit Monday with the Asian markets, and then it just carried on right through to Europe, and again today in Asia. Was it really justified? I mean, it's all to do with the fact that this US stimulus package isn't enough, or perhaps it indicates that the recession is going to be worse than we thought. Bring us some rationality here, Bronwyn.
Well, these things are always difficult. Everyone focused up to the end of the year on liquidity over the end of the year for the banks and the money markets and so on. A lot of people thought after we get into the new year, things will stabilise and it will be okay. But we've had much worse economic numbers from the US, from Europe, from the UK.
And Japan as well.
And Japan. And what you've seen is people starting to panic about growth. We're really at the top of the earnings cycle for companies, and if growth goes as well, you know, what happens then? And I think investors have had a really good time for about 5 years, and if they all rush for the door at the same time, of course the markets will collapse. You never know quite what has triggered it. It may have been Ben Bernanke last week sort of saying that perhaps, you know, 0.5% off Fed funds is a done deal. He didn't quite say that because central bankers never do, but you know, that frightens people, not makes them feel more secure.
So what's your outlook? I mean, here we are sitting amidst this. Anyone picking up a newspaper today, anywhere in the world, will see panic sell-off, market collapse on the front page. Where do we go from here?
Well, I think the market's going down further. Quite how much is always hard to tell, but we are in a bear market in the equity markets. We may have a recession in the US. So the trend is down, but usually when you see these things come down so fast, there is a bounce. Now, whether that will wait, that bounce, until the end of the month when the Fed cuts rates, I think that's unlikely. It will come in the next few days, but it may be a bounce where, you know, it jumps up and then we go down again. It's also gone through key technical levels. You know, chartists and so on draw these charts and look and say it's gone through this key support level. It's got a lot further to go. In the UK, the FTSE 100, probably the next level is 5,500.
All right. Well, thank you very much indeed, Bronwyn, for coming in. So I'm afraid the slide continues by the looks of things. We will keep an eye on it, as you know, for you. And if we look at what European finance ministers are up to, of course, they reacted to the market fall on Monday as well. The president of the Eurogroup, Jean-Claude Juncker, who chaired a meeting of Eurozone finance ministers on Monday, said a recession in the US could no longer be ruled out. But he also said European economies are well placed to weather a downturn in the States. He added the economic situation in Europe was in no way comparable to the US and that Europe did not need a stimulus package. Up to 20,000 people are expected to voice their anger today in Bochum, Germany, where Nokia has threatened to close its plant. Nokia's announcements met with huge opposition from unions and politicians. The mobile phone giant plans to move production to Romania with the loss of 2,300 jobs in Germany. Nokia's decision sparked a debate about whether state subsidies like the ones given to Nokia should be repaid if the company decides to move away. This is World Business Report. A lot more to come in the programme, including in the dock. 4 major global banks go on trial in Milan for their alleged involvement in the collapse of the dairy firm Parmalat. But first, a look at today's UK business stories. Apart from the market slide, of course, let's have a look at some of the other business headlines. Price comparison websites are to be investigated by the UK's financial watchdog over claims they break its rules. The insurance industry is saying that ranking deals by cost constitutes giving financial advice, something most of the websites aren't authorised to do. It adds that many quotes are based on assumptions, causing some shoppers to choose inappropriate policies. The FSA confirmed it would look into the allegations. British Airways pilots are to vote on strike action in a row over the airline's plans to launch a subsidiary business. It would be the first pilot strike in 28 years. The dispute arose when BA said it was starting a new company, Open Skies, which would sell luxury flights from continental Europe directly to America. Modern technology may be making our lives simpler, but it's bad for the environment. That's according to a new study by the consultants Deloitte, which says that new high-tech gadgets in our homes are soaking up more energy than ever before. Phones, internet, set-top boxes and video games are just some of the power-hungry devices which are increasing our carbon footprint. JD Wetherspoon will tell the City how it did during the last 3 months of 2007. The pub group, which last month banned grown-ups from having more than 2 alcoholic drinks if their kids are present, is expected to say that in the post-smoking ban world, beer sales are falling while pub goers eat more food. Another company telling us how it's getting along is Morrisons. By all accounts, the Bradford-based grocer had a good festive period and may even be catching up rivals such as Sainsbury's for the prize of being Britain's third largest supermarket. Heavy discounting in the run-up to Christmas may have been good for sales, but might have hit its bottom line. Talking of the bottom line, let's have a look at those numbers again. Here they are. Aruna had them. It wasn't nice at all, was it, yesterday in Europe? Today, we've touched on some of the companies that will be making the news. We've got the likes of Morrisons and JD Wetherspoon. Business does go on. Even though these dramatic events take place, there are those companies coming out with their earnings news. Also, amongst those that didn't do well and perhaps didn't get in the news so much was the likes of Rio Tinto. It slid quite a lot because BHP Billiton has not come through with a new offer. Also, we've got metal prices going down as well. But interestingly, we've got the oil price on the way down as well, below $90 a barrel. So that has an impact on the likes of Shell and BP. This is World Business Report on the World Today. Time now for the main news headlines. Karen's got those.
Thanks, Sally. As you've been reporting, stock markets in Asia have fallen sharply again, a day after share prices around the world tumbled amid fears of a recession in the US. Earlier, trading on the Mumbai Stock Exchange was suspended after heavy losses. Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama clash in a heated debate ahead of the South Carolina primary election. And New Zealand bids farewell to its greatest hero, a state funeral for the explorer Sir Edmund Hillary.
In the business headlines, the only way is down. Markets continuing their slump following a massive sell-off on Monday. And a national champion at last. France's GDF and Suez may come a step closer to a mega merger. And let's now look at that planned merger between Gaz de France and Suez. As I say, could take a step forward. Could go back, though, as well. A court is to rule in a case in which GDF's management's accused its own works council of trying to block the process. Meanwhile, workers from the French utility company are being called on to join another protest against the government's planned pension reforms. Asda Sanford has more.
The two companies had hoped to become one by the middle of the year, with a merger of equals to help meet increased international competition. Suez and Gaz de France needed the nod from their own employees. But after 5 months, 27 meetings and 3,000 pages of documents translated into 6 languages, that's not yet been forthcoming. For the head of Suez, it's been a relatively smooth ride. Despite fears of job losses, the energy group said it would hire thousands more workers worldwide. Its French Works Council came out in favour of the merger. Not so at Gaz de France. The gas company's unions remain opposed to the project, which they say has changed. They want more information, but managers accuse them of deliberately obstructing the consultation process. The court's decision could be a boost or a setback to President Sarkozy's wish to see a new French energy giant. He was instrumental in securing the merger deal last year. The climate's not helped by more conflict over pensions. Last November, gas, electricity and transport workers went on strike. Now, despite ongoing talks, one main union has called for a large protest in Paris on Tuesday, accusing the government of trying to force through reforms. Alistair Sanford, BBC News, Paris.
Now, it was the most spectacular collapse of a company Europe had ever seen. We're talking about the 2003 Italian dairy giant Parmalat going bust under a mountain of debt. Today, 4 of the world's largest investment banks go on trial in Milan on charges of stock market manipulation during its collapse. David Willey has the latest from Rome.
The 4 banks, 2 of them American, Citigroup and Morgan Stanley, plus the German Deutsche Bank and the Swiss bank UBS, are alleged to have continued to offer Parmalat bond issues when they already knew that the Italian dairy group was bankrupt. They allegedly earned fees from the dying company. All contest the charges and deny any wrongdoing. Citigroup has said it was a victim of fraud, not an instigator. Enrico Biondi, the financier appointed by the Italian government to sort out the mess caused by the Parmalat bankruptcy and who's now head of the refloated dairy group, has said the 4 banks all knew about Parmalat's problems but continued to offer to raise more debt. More than a dozen local employees of the accused banks are also named in the indictment. Under Italian law, the banks are responsible for any criminal behaviour on the part of their employees. Before its collapse, Parmalat was Italy's largest food company and the fourth largest in Europe. A whole of $18 billion was discovered in the company accounts. Callisto Tanzi, the former CEO, and other company officials are currently on trial for fraudulent bankruptcy, market rigging and false accounting. More than 100,000 creditors, many of them small savers, lost money in the scandal. 4 other international banks, who also provided financial services to Parmalat, JP Morgan, Bank of America, Banco Santander and ABN AMRO, are not being charged by Italian justice. David Willey, BBC News, Rome.
Well, for more on this, let's talk to Damien Wild, Editor-in-Chief at Accountancy Age. Good to see you, Damien. This is such an ongoing saga, isn't it? I mean, this has been going on for years. Can you tell us what the outcome of this case might be with the banks?
I'm not quite that brave. As you say, it has been going on for years, but we're only 4 or 5 years into this. It'll go on for many years yet. There are very many court cases out there. This is quite a significant one, perhaps the most significant one so far. It all boils down to who knew what when. Executives are blaming bankers, bankers are blaming executives, and pretty soon everyone will be blaming the auditors.
Interestingly, as David mentioned in his report, these banks are adamant they didn't do anything wrong at all. And as you say, this has been going on for years. It will continue to do so. It's going to cost these banks a fortune in legal fees. They're not settling. Others have settled. I mean, they're in it for the long haul, aren't they?
Very much so, and I think you're right to point out the difference there, that everyone is breaking ranks. Some of the banks have settled. There was a big settlement before Christmas. So far, Parmalat's recovered over €1 billion. Other banks are very much standing firm. In a big financial case like this, it's never easy to prove motive, so there's quite a high threshold there, and that's what it boils down to, motive, whether they knowingly misled the market. Equally for the banks, these 4 banks that employ thousands of people in Italy, it's difficult to be accountable for all your staff. I think the smoking gun here will be whether there is anything in writing.
But presumably for those who lost their savings, I mean, the little person in this scenario, who was one of the biggest losers, they won't get anything out of this, will they?
It's unlikely. A lot of the money is going to bondholders that's been recovered so far. Where the big bucks are will be in the next round of court cases, where there are civil recovery attempts made. If authorities in America give the go-ahead for those claims to happen in America, we could see some significant sums recovered.
All right, Damien, we're going to leave it there, but thanks very much indeed for coming in. Well, let's have a look at the papers. And as you would assume, and I'm sure you can imagine, there's only one story really that's dominating today. That's the market plunge. Here in Britain, all the major papers lead with the FTSEs and other indices spectacular falls. Some, like The Guardian, calling it another Black Monday. They're referring to the major market crash in October 1987. If we look at France, Le Figaro is also referring to the market slump as Black Monday. The CAC 40, which is the main market, had its worst day since 9/11 in France. In India, the Economic Times, again, calling yesterday's slump another Black Monday. It says all the euphoria of the boom in initial share offerings and hype valuations disappeared in a flash as India's main index, the Sensex, fell over 1,400 points. And of course, the markets in India are suspended today, as the slide did continue, and swiftly. As and when they start to trade again, we'll let you know. But just to let you know that here at the moment, things are not looking any better, with about 5 minutes of trade to go in Japan. That's the situation behind me. And that is all from World Business Report. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Sally Bundock.
And I'm Karen Giannoni. It's been great to have you with us on the programme. Do join us again on The World Today.
Take care.
Hello there. Well, it's a real topsy-turvy week of weather after all the clown, rain and snow of yesterday. Today we see something a little quieter with regards to the weather. Certainly a chilly start to the day, and that does mean the risk of some icy roads out and about. A Met Office weather warning out for this, and you can see the reason why. Clear skies overnight, temperatures falling rapidly, and that means a widespread frost developing. -3 in Aberdeen and in Newcastle, and it's for southern Scotland. The cloud just started to make its way into western parts of Wales and also into Northern Ireland, bringing with it outbreaks of rain and drizzle, and it's really not a very promising start here. Here the exception to the dry, fine weather. As we move through the day on Tuesday, we'll gradually see this new Atlantic front bringing cloud and rain in from the west. So the sunshine being increasingly interrupted by more hazy sunshine as upper cloud spills in. But always the east holding on to the best of the sunshine. Here, though, temperatures really struggling to rise after a very chilly, frosty start to the day. Temperatures 6 or 7 for many parts of the Midlands and northern England. Hazy sunshine as we head through the afternoon in Manchester. Still holding on to the sunshine for Newcastle, but top temperatures at best only 5 here and 5-2 in Aberdeen. Western parts of Scotland, you can see cloud and rain spreading in, and also the wind starting to pick up from the west and staying rather dull, damp and wet across Northern Ireland too. Rain making its way into western parts of Wales elsewhere. A rather cloudy, dull and damp day, and a similar story for the south and west. You can see the winds coming from this very mild direction. Temperatures 10 there in Plymouth. For the west, it's more cloudy with outbreaks of rain and drizzle, but for the east, staying hold of that sunny day on Tuesday. All change, as I said, after with the flip-flop weather come Wednesday. It's cloudy, it's dull, it's damp, but again, at least it will be mild with the air coming up from the south and west. Temperatures 10, 11, maybe even 13 in the far south, with the heaviest rain always across Scotland and northern parts of Ireland. Come Thursday, this rain band sinks its way south, just starting to clear the southeast corner as we move through the day, but on Thursday you'll notice a much colder feel to the weather, some blustery northwesterly winds bringing with it the rain, sleet and snow, 4 or 5 in the north, 9 to 10 in the south.
Art is a step from what is obvious and well known toward what is arcane and concealed.
When is a garden not a garden? It doesn't rationalise, but is it beautiful? I don't know. Look at that. Look at that thing. It's upsetting me. I don't know what to think.
The garden is a culture concept to me. First, you have to define what the culture is.
Landscape architecture and garden are an art. And yet, it's the most human of all arts because we inhabit it.
Join Monty on his quest to explore 80 of the most spectacular gardens of the world.
There's not a lot to say. All you can do is just experience it.
Around the World in 80 Gardens begins Sunday at 9 on BBC Two.
It is said that in the moment between life and death, your life flashes before you.
It's July 1981.
When I saw the bullet, I thought, this is it, Alex.
This is how it ends.
Only it hasn't ended. And I am most definitely here.
Blimey. My reputation precedes me.
Ashes to Ashes, from the makers of Life on Mars.
As far up the Quattro.
Coming soon to BBC One.
Alone on Bodmin Moor, men can be men.
The modern world, it's back there.
Be who they want to be.
I don't want to be the same as everybody else.
Do what they want to do.
Do enjoy doing my thing.
And eat what they want to eat.
All full of badger and lovely things.
Wonderland continues with the man who eats badgers and other strange tales from Bodmin Moor. Tomorrow at 9:50 on BBC Two.
Hello, good morning. Serving Tuesday's breakfast. This